Hello, listener. If you are hearing this, you are still alive. And these days, that already puts you ahead of most people. If you are new here, consider subscribing and tell me in the comments where you are listening from. I read every one. My name is Daniel Harper. I spent most of my adult life working offshore in maintenance, safety checks, and emergency response. It is the kind of work where you learn fast that steel fails, whether lies and panic kills quicker than fire. I thought I had seen every kind of emergency the ocean could throw at a man. I was wrong. Because when everything started falling apart down on the mainland, when phones went silent, roads locked up, and people stopped acting like people, I was not trapped in a city or a suburb. I was standing on an abandoned oil rig in the Gulf, surrounded by nothing but dark water and wind. And this is how I turned that rusted platform into the only safe place for miles, and survived 30 days after the world I knew stopped answering back. Offshore work is not glamorous. There are no clean lines and no quiet moments. Just constant noise, rust in the air, and salt that eats everything it touches. Your clothes smell like metal and diesel, no matter how many times you wash them. Your hands never really dry. Out there you live by checklists. Not because management says so, but because forgetting one step can get someone killed. The ocean does not forgive shortcuts. It does not care how tired you are or how long your shift has been. Every shift starts the same way. Pressure readings first. Generator load second. Flare status after that. Then weather bands on the radar. You learn to read storms the way farmers read the sky. Not just color, but movement. Speed. What looks small on a screen can still tear steel apart if it hits right. I knew that rig better than I knew my own apartment back on shore. Every ladder rung. Every hatch hinge. Every bolt that liked to loosen itself when the temperature dropped at night. The control room glass was rated for storms, high wind, flying spray. Not for impact. We all knew that. It was never meant to stop a body or a tool moving at speed. The west stairwell was worse. Corroded steel hidden under layers of paint. We flagged it months ago, put it on the report. Maintenance backlog. Low priority. Out there, low priority usually means later or never. The emergency lifeboats were another story. On paper they were fine. In reality, half of them had not been certified since before COVID. We joked about it during drills. Nervous jokes. The kind people make when they know the answer and do not like it. You learn to hear problems before you see them. A generator that hums a little too high. A pump that vibrates instead of settling. Metal talks if you listen long enough. I always told the new guys the same thing. The rig does not kill you. Complacency does. Most accidents do not come from storms or explosions. They come from familiarity. From thinking you know a system well enough to skip a step. From telling yourself you will fix it next shift. That mindset saved my life later. Not because I was brave, but because I was methodical. I never assumed something would work just because it worked yesterday. I checked doors twice. I counted steps in low light. I memorized which breakers fed which systems. Out there, you do not trust luck. You trust procedures. And you trust your ability to stay calm when those procedures stop working. At the time, I thought these habits were just part of the job. A way to make it to the end of a contract. Get paid. Go home. I did not know they were training me. Not for the ocean, but for what was coming from the mainland. The first alerts came through my phone. Not sirens. Not official warnings. Just short videos sent by people who were scared and did not know who else to send them to. The footage was grainy and shaky. People screaming inside grocery stores. Shopping carts left in the middle of aisles. Shelves stripped clean in minutes. At first, management called it civil unrest, a breakdown in public order, something the authorities would handle once people calmed down. Then the word quarantine started showing up, quietly at first. A banner on a news channel. A sentence buried at the bottom of a report. Down on the coast, highways locked up. Traffic feeds froze in place. Cars packed bumper to bumper with nowhere to go. We watched it on a small screen in the control room while alarms stayed green and systems kept humming. Out there on the rig, everything still ran on schedule. Shift changes happened on time. Meals were served. Logs were signed. We were 100 feet above the water, surrounded by open ocean. It felt distant, like watching someone else's emergency through thick glass. The radio never stopped crackling. Emergency traffic from the mainland bleeding into our channels. Voices overlapping. Calls cut off mid-sentence. They are not responding to commands. That phrase came up more than once. A few minutes later, someone else said it again, louder this time. They are biting people. Nobody laughed. Nobody made jokes. We all knew what that meant, even if nobody wanted to say it out loud. Our supervisor told us to stay calm. He said, "Panic spreads faster than facts." He told us to keep production stable and not panic the crew. We followed orders because that is what you do offshore. You do not improvise unless you have to. You trust the chain of command until it breaks. Phones lost signal sometime that afternoon. Not all at once. Just fewer bars. Then none. The internet slowed to a crawl. Then stopped loading anything new. Old pages still opened. New ones did not. That was when the distance started to close. We were not watching anymore. We were listening. The radio traffic changed tone. Less structure. More shouting. Someone was crying. Someone else was praying. The Coast Guard frequency went quiet for several long minutes, then came back with a different voice. One we did not recognize. They were asking for status reports that nobody answered. We looked at each other in the control room, and nobody spoke. Not because we were scared, but because we all understood the same thing at the same time. The systems were still running. The lights were still on. But the world that supported them was breaking apart. Our supervisor repeated his order once more. Stay calm. Keep production stable. That was the last official order we ever received from the mainland. After that, the radio kept talking. But nobody was really in charge anymore. And we were alone out there. It happened during what should have been a routine power transfer. Nothing dramatic. No alarms at first. Just a scheduled load shift between generators that we had done 100 times before. Then came the surge. One sharp spike across the panels. Lights flared white for a fraction of a second. Then everything went quiet. Not the quiet of rest. The wrong kind of quiet. The hum of machinery vanished. Fans slowed and stopped. Monitors went black one by one. Down on the mainland, the grid went dark. We did not see it happen. We felt it. Phones lost signal almost immediately. No bars. No emergency tones. Just dead glass in our hands. The GPS units froze on their last known position. Numbers locked in place like time itself had stopped moving. That was the moment it sank in. The outbreak was bad. But this was worse. No rescue boat was coming. Fuel shortages. Ports closed. Crews gone. No helicopter was flying into this. Air traffic had gone silent hours ago. Whether or not did not matter anymore. The rig was on its own. People gathered near the helipad without being told to. That is where rescue usually comes from. That is where hope lives offshore. Some were calling family even though there was no signal. Some were staring at the horizon like they expected lights to appear. I did not stay with them long. I walked the perimeter once, checked stairwells, looked at the railings, watched how people moved when fear started to take over. Crowds are dangerous in emergencies. Not because people are bad, but because panic compresses space. I knew I had two choices: stay near the helipad with everyone else and wait for help that might never come, or move upward. The old maintenance cabin sat higher than the rest of the rig. It was not meant for comfort, just function. Steel walls.
One door, no blind corners.
I had inspected it years earlier and remembered everything that mattered. The door opened inward. The hinges were reinforced. The floor was solid steel, not grated. I went there without telling anyone. Not out of cruelty, out of clarity. I stepped inside, closed the hatch. Then I took the steel bar and slid it into place. Added the chain. Wrapped the rope tight. When I finished, I stood still and listened. The rig creaked around me. Metal settling. Wind pushing against old surfaces. For the first time since the alert started, my hands stopped shaking. That was the moment of no return. Once the door was strapped shut, there was no pretending this was temporary. No drills. No supervisors coming back on the radio. I was no longer waiting for instructions. I had chosen to survive. And everything that came after started with that decision. Shelter, water, heat, movement. That is the order that keeps you breathing. I said it out loud to myself to make it real, to slow my thoughts down and turn panic into steps. The door came first. Always the door. The maintenance cabin had one steel hatch, and that was both a blessing and a risk. One way in means fewer angles to watch. It also means, if that door fails, everything fails with it. I tested the steel bar by putting my full weight against it. Then the backup chain. Then the rope. Not because I expected one layer to fail, but because I expected fatigue to set in. Metal weakens, not slip. Redundancy keeps you alive. Once the door was secured, I turned to the windows. The cabin had two narrow panes reinforced for weather, but still glass. Glass reflects light. Glass gives away movement. I covered them with fire blankets pulled from an emergency locker. Not for insulation. For light discipline. Out on the water, light travels far at night. A single reflection can be seen for miles. You do not glow offshore. Next came water. The emergency kits were still stocked. Bottled water, sealed and dated. Iodine tablets taped to the inside of the lid. Not ideal, but clean enough to trust. I counted every bottle and wrote the number down. Guessing wastes water. Heat came after that. The cabin had a small emergency stove and fuel canisters meant for short-term use. I checked every seal, listened for leaks, smelled the air before lighting anything. Fire is comfort. Fire is also a risk. Movement was last. You do not want to be climbing ladders or squeezing through hatches unless you have to. Every movement costs energy. Every movement makes noise. Once the basics were secure, I organized the space. I split the room into zones. Sleep along the far wall. Storage stacked low and tight. Cooking near ventilation. Nothing touched the floor unless it had to. Loose items slide when the rig shifts. Sliding items make noise. Everything had a place, and everything went back to that place when I was done with it. I have seen people lose their lives over clutter. A tool left in a walkway. A cable not secured. A moment of distraction. Disorder kills faster than hunger. When I finished, I sat on the floor and listened. The rig made its usual sounds. Metal expanding and contracting. Wind passing through open structures. Nothing new. Nothing sudden. That was good. I checked my watch and realized hours had passed without me noticing. For the first time since the power went out, I was not reacting. I was building. This was no longer a place to hide for a few hours. It was a base. Not comfortable, not permanent, but stable. And stability is what buys you time. Out there, time is the most valuable resource you have. Once the base was set, I finally allowed myself to eat. Slowly, measured. I did not know how long I would be here. But I knew one thing for certain. If I was going to survive more than a few days, it would be because I treated this cabin like a system, not a shelter. And systems only work when every part is checked, secured, and respected. To survive longer than a week, I needed more. The supplies inside the cabin would keep me alive for a few days, maybe a little longer if I was careful. But time offshore always works against you. Salt corrodes. Food runs out. Fatigue builds even when you think you are resting. If I wanted to last, I had to go back into the rig. I clipped my harness and tested the line with my full weight. Then I checked the anchor point. Then I checked it again. Offshore, you never trust the first check. I moved slow and deliberate. Hatch, rail, ladder. Every transition mattered. Every hand placement. Every step. The rig felt abandoned in a way I had never experienced before. Not shut down. Not powered off. Just left behind. Coffee mugs were still sitting on workbenches. Cold now, but untouched. Boots were lined up under bunks, as if their owners planned to come back after a short break. There were no bodies. That was the strange part. No signs of struggle. No blood. Just absence. Absence can be worse than evidence. It lets your mind fill in details it does not need. I stayed focused on the task. Water first. Then food. Then anything that could keep my hands working and my body warm. I loaded a crate with bottled water and canned food. Protein bars. Spare gloves in different sizes. Extra socks sealed in plastic. I ignored anything bulky. Weight matters when you climb. Every few minutes I stopped and listened. Not just for footsteps. For changes in the rig itself. Metal sounds different when something moves where it should not. I did not hear anything out of place. That did not mean I relaxed. When the crate was full, I secured it and started the return trip. Slower this time. More careful. Climbing with weight changes your balance. It pulls you forward. It makes mistakes easier. When I reached the cabin, I did not rush inside. I checked the door. Checked the area around it. Then I slipped in and sealed it shut behind me. The sound of the latch locking echoed in the small space. Solid. Final. It felt like shutting a car door in a hurricane. That brief moment where you cut yourself off from the chaos outside and trust the barrier you just closed. I set the crate down and did not move for a long time. Just listened. The rig creaked the way it always had. No new sounds. No sudden impacts. That raid changed everything. Until then I had been reacting. Holding ground. Making do. Now I had extended my time. Bought days, maybe weeks. But I had also learned something important. The rig was empty. And emptiness does not stay empty forever. Whatever had driven people away from this place, it could come back. And next time, I might not be alone on the ladders. I was not alone for long. I realized that the next morning when I heard footsteps that did not match the rhythm of the rig. Too uneven. Too careful. I did not open the door right away. I watched through the small gap near the hinge. Listened. Counted breaths. The first one I saw was Maya. She worked logistics before everything stopped. Supplies manifests. Fuel tracking. Inventory audits. The second was Tomas, a mechanic. The kind who could fix almost anything with the wrong tool and a bad attitude. They both looked exhausted. Not panicked. Not injured. just worn down in a way that only comes from staying alert for too long. Before anyone stepped inside, we checked each other. Sleeves rolled up, necks exposed, ankles, hands. No shortcuts, no exceptions. Trust is important. Verification keeps you alive. Once they were inside the cabin, the space felt smaller immediately. More heat, more movement, more noise if we were not careful. The first thing we did was talk through what each of us could do. Not titles, skills. Maya knew supplies. She could tell you how long something would last without guessing. She thought in numbers and margins. Tomas understood machines, pumps, valves, generators. If something started making the wrong sound, he would hear it before it failed. I handled structure and movement. Doors, lines, routes in and out. Once roles were clear, we made rules. Rules are not about control. They are about removing uncertainty. Say what you use before you use it. Say it again when you put it back. Do not leave tools loose. Ever. Loose tools roll. Rolling tools make noise. Noise attracts attention. No sudden movements near the windows. No light near the glass. And never hit the glass. Not to get someone else's attention. Not in frustration. Not even in your sleep. Glass is a boundary. Once you forget that, you stop respecting it. We agreed on watch rotations. Short shifts. No one stays awake too long. Fatigue lies to you. It tells you that you are fine when you are not. We ate together that night. Small portions. Slow. Nobody talked much. Not because there was nothing to say, but because we all understood the same truth. This was no longer a solo problem. It was a shared one. That made us stronger. And more dangerous to ourselves if we failed to stay disciplined. Before sleeping, we went over the rules one more time. Out loud. Together. Not like a meeting. Like a ritual. When the lights went down and the rig settled into its nighttime sounds, I realized something important. Surviving alone is about endurance. Surviving together is about coordination. And coordination only works when everyone knows their place, their responsibility, and the limits they are not allowed to cross. That cabin was no longer just a shelter. It was a system run by 3 people who depended on each other. If one part failed, the whole thing would come apart. That night, I slept lighter than before, but for the first time since the power went out. I did not sleep alone. The storm hit at night. There was no warning siren and no slow buildup. Just a sudden change in pressure that made the air feel heavier inside the cabin. The wind came first. It howled through the steel like an animal trapped in a cage. Not one long sound, but shifting tones as it found gaps and edges to push against. The rig groaned in response. Old metal stretching and tightening. Bolts complaining under stress. They were never meant to carry for this long. The straps on the door pulled tight. I could see the rope fibers straining under the load. Each gust tested every knot I had tied earlier. Inside the cabin, nothing moved. Not because it was calm, but because everything had been secured. A loose item would have been deadly. Noise attracts attention. Movement breaks focus. Below us, something moved. At first it was subtle, a shift that did not match the rhythm of the storm. Then again, louder this time. We heard metal scraping somewhere under the platform. Slow, deliberate, not debris, not the wind. Breathing followed after that, low and uneven. The kind of sound a chest makes when it works too hard. Nobody spoke. We did not need to. Fear narrows your senses. Training sharpens them. I focused on the door. The hinges held. The bar stayed locked. The chain did not slip. Water bottles rattled lightly inside their crate, then went still. The fire blankets stayed pinned against the glass. No light escaped. Another gust hit harder than the last. The cabin leaned just enough to make your stomach react. then settled again. Outside the storm, and whatever moved beneath us seemed to overlap. Wind and scraping. Metal and breath. Time stretched. Seconds felt longer than minutes. I kept replaying each decision I had made earlier. Every knot. Every strap. Every choice to reinforce instead of assume. If I had skipped one step. If I had trusted a single layer of protection. If I had left the glass uncovered, we would not have made it to morning. That thought stayed with me as the storm dragged on. Not panic. Clarity. Eventually the wind lost strength. The howling softened into distant pressure. The rig stopped groaning and returned to its usual tired sounds. The breathing below faded with it. Metal scraping slowed, then stopped. We waited long after the storm passed. No movement. No sound. When I finally allowed myself to sit down, my legs shook from holding tension too long. Not fear. Adrenaline. That night proved something important. The base worked. Not because it was strong, but because it was prepared. Out there, preparation is the difference between a bad night and the last night you ever see. And the storm made one thing very clear. The rig was no longer empty. Supplies ran low faster than any of us wanted to admit. No matter how careful you are, numbers always tell the truth in the end. Less water in the crate. Fewer cans stacked against the wall. Fuel canisters that felt lighter every time you lifted them. That is when the arguments started. Not loud ones. Not shouting. The dangerous kind. Quiet disagreements. Long looks held a second too long. How much to eat? How much to save? Whether we were being too careful or not careful enough. Hunger changes the way people think. So does fear. Maya ran the numbers again and again, hoping they would change. They did not. We all came to the same conclusion without saying it out loud. If we stayed inside the cabin and waited, we would run out before help ever came. That meant one last raid. Not a search. Not an exploration. A grab and go. We planned it like a checklist. In. Grab what is visible. Out at the first sound that does not belong. No detours. No curiosity. No hero moments. We moved just after dawn when the light was flat and shadows were shorter. Each of us carried only what we needed to move fast. The rig felt different this time. Heavier. Like it was holding its breath. We reached the storage area without incident. Crates were still where we had left them, some torn open, some untouched. We worked fast, hands moving without words. Water first, then food, anything compact. That was when we heard it. Dragging footsteps, slow, uneven. Metal scraping against metal somewhere down the corridor. Not wind. Not loose equipment. We froze. Training tells you to confirm before you react. Instinct tells you to run. The sound came again, closer this time. Something scraped the wall hard enough to make the structure vibrate. That was enough. We dropped everything. Crates. Cans. Tools. None of it mattered anymore. We ran. Boots slammed against steel decking. Breathing turned sharp and loud. Every step echoed farther than it should have. Behind us the dragging sound sped up. Not fast, but purposeful. We did not look back. We did not slow down until the cabin door was closed and strapped tight again. Inside we stood pressed against the walls listening. Footsteps outside stopped. Scraping faded. Silence returned in pieces. Nobody spoke for a long time. Eventually Tomas sat down hard on the floor and laughed once, then stopped. Not because it was funny, but because the release had nowhere else to go. That raid settled the argument for good. There would be no more trips into the rig. Whatever was moving out there now knew the layout. Knew the sounds. Knew we were still alive. We had pushed our luck as far as it would go. From that moment on, the cabin was not just a base. It was a line. Cross it, and you might not come back. And every one of us understood the same thing. Survival was no longer about gathering more. It was about holding what we had and knowing when to stop reaching for anything else. The radio answered back late that night. Not with static, not with broken fragments. A clear voice cut through the noise like it had been waiting for us to listen. It was a man, older, calm in a way that only comes from having nothing left to panic about. He asked for our position, not our names, not our story, just coordinates and head count. We gave him what we could. Approximate location, 3 survivors, limited supplies. There was a pause on the line, long enough for me to wonder if we had already lost the signal again. Then he spoke. He said height buys you time, not safety. He said elevated positions delay contact. They reduce angles. They help you see trouble before it reaches you. But they also trap you. He told us that every group they had lost so far had something in common. They stayed too long. They waited until walking became harder than staying. If you can still walk, you should move. His voice was not dramatic, not heroic. It sounded like a man reading weather data. Matter of fact, experienced. He told us there was a pickup window forming 48 hours out. Weather dependent, no guarantees. If we wanted a chance, we would need to reach a rendezvous point on the water. A simple marker. No lights, no signals until instructed. The radio went quiet again after that. Inside the cabin, nobody spoke at first. Leaving meant risk, exposure, unknown ground. Staying meant certainty. We would run out. Eventually something would reach us. Maya broke the silence. She said, the numbers did not work anymore. Thomas nodded without argument. He had seen enough machines fail to know when a system had reached its limit. I looked around the cabin. The door we had trusted. The straps. The blankets over the glass. It had kept us alive. But it was never meant to be permanent. The man on the radio was right. Height buys you time, not safety. We agreed without voting, without speeches. It was time to leave. That decision changed the way the cabin felt immediately. It was no longer a refuge. It was a starting point. Once you decide to move, fear shifts direction. You stop worrying about what might come for you and start focusing on what you need to carry with you. We shut the radio off to save power. Sat quietly, listening to the rig one last time. The sounds were familiar now, predictable. That was how I knew we were ready. Familiar places feel heavier when you know you are about to abandon them. And that weight told me the truth. Staying any longer would have killed us. We packed in silence, 1 bag each, nothing more. When you prepare to leave a place that kept you alive, you learn very quickly what matters and what does not. Comfort stays behind. Redundancy disappears. Water came first. Not as much as we wanted. Only what we could carry without slowing down. Then meds, pain relief, antibiotics, anything that could stop infection or buy time if one of us went down. Bandages after that. Clean cloth, tape, pressure wraps. Each item went into the bag with intention. If you could not explain why you were carrying it, you left it behind. We left the rest. Extra food, spare tools, fuel canisters. Not because they were useless, but because weight kills people faster than hunger on the move. Before sealing the bags, we went through them together. Not to argue, to agree. Everyone needed to know what the others carried. If someone fell, the rest of us had to compensate without hesitation. When the bags were ready, we turned our attention to the cabin. It did not feel like abandoning it. It felt like closing a chapter. We cleaned the space as best we could. Put supplies where they were easy to see. Lined water bottles against the wall. Stacked blankets near the door. Then we made the note. A piece of cardboard torn from an old box, thick enough to last. The words were simple. Boil water. Run stove short. Keep door strapped. Stay off glass at night. No explanations. No warnings. Anyone who found this place would already know why those rules mattered. We tied the note to the inside of the door where it could not be missed. Then we strapped the door shut one last time. Not to lock someone out, but to force them to think before they went inside. A loose door invites carelessness. A tight one demands respect. We stood there for a moment without speaking. That cabin had been more than shelter. It had been discipline, routine. A reason to stay calm when everything else felt unstable. Leaving it behind felt heavier than leaving the rig itself. Legacy is not about ownership. It is about passing on what you learned the hard way. If someone found that cabin later, cold, hungry, scared, those rules might give them a chance. And chances are rare currency in a world like this. When we turned away, none of us looked back. Not because we did not care, but because if we did, we might not leave at all. Some places save you by teaching you when to go. That cabin did exactly that. 2 days later, a boat found us. No sirens. No celebration. Just an engine idling low in the water, and a man waving us forward like this was another job that needed to get done before dark. We climbed aboard one at a time, hands shaking, legs stiff from days of tension and bad sleep. Nobody asked questions. Nobody wanted answers. As the boat pulled away, I looked back once. At the rig, it stood there the same as always. Steel against sky. Quiet. From a distance, it looked empty again, like nothing had ever happened there at all. But I knew better. That platform had bought us time. It had given us structure when the world lost it. Rules when chaos took over. That was how I turned an abandoned oil platform into the only safe place in the Gulf, and how I survived the first 30 days after the world went quiet. If you are still listening, thank you. Like, subscribe, and tell me where you are listening from.